That's the model, according to Stuart Lancaster. Very briefly, Alan, we'll talk about that before we get to everything else. The identity of the provinces is very important. We've talked about this ad nauseum now. If you start transferring players, suddenly identity starts becoming a bit diluted. The proper solution for the other provinces not producing enough players is to invest massively in the club game and in the underage game in Munster, in Connacht and in Ulster. Not to just say, OK, we're going to punish Leinster for producing all these great players and redistribute the wealth. It's to spend loads of the IRFU's money on hiring coaches at underage level and build a structure for the future.
Yeah, for sure. But the problem with that, Ger, is if you take a step back for a couple of years and the team drops, you actually, it has a double effect. You lose money. So the ideal scenario is for Munster, Ulster, Connacht, to try and do that as best they can with the help of the IRFU, but also try and stay competitive. And that's probably where the frustration probably comes from when people talk about Munster and the identity and outside players coming in, playing too many of them at times, and that's where that issue is. It's, to be fair, Stuart has been incredible, and I have massive respect for him, but for Leinster, what they've created now is much more sustainable because of the systems they have in place through the school systems. It helps them a lot.
Absolutely.
So you can't just go and say, but I do agree with you to a point, and this is going right down to the grassroots level in the other provinces, is train the coaches, get better development for young players. And we hear it about the Southern Hemisphere so often, about the natural skill and ability that they get from really good coaching from underage. It goes right back to a club, 7 or 8 year old playing with a club or in whatever province. What kind of coaching are they getting as they grow up along? And a lot of times it's parents, because the people aren't there in the club to do it.
The model for me is not the model that I think the other three provinces, and maybe Ulster's a bit different because they do have a school tradition, but is not to ape what Leinster are doing. It's to ape what Dublin GAA are doing. Yeah. They're spending money on coaches to get into the schools.
But to be fair,
and the IRFU have loads of money, so don't let them say we can't afford to do it.
Going right back to the coaching courses and training coaches, that's been going on for years, where the coaches have to get
how much money are they spending
accredited? Well, it does. I went on coaching courses when I was young. All the guys in my club in Clonwilliam the coaches there would go on the coaching courses. But there is a point that I get, that if you can get top quality guys going around to the clubs, and the fundamentals and the structures are there, it probably just needs to be invested more and more and more.
Flood those with money.
In an ideal world, I guarantee you talk to anyone invested in Munster Rugby, they'd love that conveyor belt of players coming through. And I think there has been a significant shift and change in that policy and that mentality in Munster about trying to develop more younger players and really putting a massive ownership and emphasis on it around their academy. And the money that they actually did. You know, Munster have a commercial board, and a lot of their fundraising and their contribution is to the Green Core Academy.
And now look,
try and develop that.
And I think that's great, but the IRFU should be spending all that money, I think.
Well, I think they do invest a lot now, Ger. I agree with you.
I just think it should be more. Absolutely.
Well, looking at it currently, when you think of the other provinces are much more need of that scenario than probably Leinster at the moment. But
yeah, the Leinster system works, but I'm just making the point, trying to ape it.
Split Leinster in two.
Well, look,
split Dublin in two.
I mean, that conversation is going to start happening at some level in the next while.
You look at the back row situation. So I was going to talk about obviously the weekend. We've man of the matches in the back rows of John Hodnett, who's a really exciting prospect in Munster, and Will Connors, very similar in stature. They're very, very alike.
What are they both like? Tell us, because people won't know them.
They're just abrasive and aggressive and quick.
Where do they play?
Full of energy. They're both playing 7.
Right.
Hodnett was really impressive for Ireland, and I think he probably would have had more involvement at this stage with Munster, only for picking up an injury after that World Cup last year and getting a shoulder operation. So if I'm correct, I think it was a shoulder operation, but he was injured for a number of months. But he made his debut on Friday night. He was really good. The Kings were poor. The Southern Kings were really poor. Munster won comprehensively. But Will Connors is a bit more advanced in his development because he's had more game time, and he's been sensational for Leinster. And you talk about you know, that the amount of players they have. When Jack Conan comes back and Dan Levy, the amount of back rows that Leinster are going to have. And they're going to have this situation again where who stays, who goes, and what players feel, where they feel they can fit in and get on the team, because they're top quality players right across the board.
Connacht is 23, turning 24 in April, so he's not young.
He's not young, but I think he's made his kind of breakthrough this year and really grabbed the attention, and he's had a number of man-of-the-match performances. And
is he an out-and-out 7?
He's someone who can play 6 as well, I'd say.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. But he's hard and he's quick and he's aggressive and really powerful in the carry again. So it's unbelievable, you know, the amount of players that they have and young players coming through.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a problem for Leinster. You know, their identity that you're talking about, that Stuart Lancaster's talking about, they have that ability to select from all these homegrown players because they're coming through all the time.
Connor's turned down the opportunity to move to Connacht towards the end of the 2017-2018 season, and who knows, maybe his career is further advanced, but maybe getting that quality of coaching that he's had at Leinster is going to turn him into a player who, when he's 26, 27, 28, is our best number 7. So
yeah, who knows? And Levy's back running, which is fantastic to hear as well. And you know, I think for none of them will want to leave now. That's the problem. How do you facilitate all those players? And that's the issue. And some of them will be, I know they can't be forced, but the other provinces, Connacht would you know, gladly take any of those back rowers at this stage. They had a brilliant win at the weekend, I think, which kind of puts them back on track a little bit. There were a couple of points, only a point ahead of Cardiff going into that game, so they're in 4th place now. To win 29-0 against the Cardiff Blues, I think was very impressive in really, really windy conditions. They badly needed it because they've been on a poor run of late. Now, they had tough European games as well, but Connacht were really good at the weekend.
It seems that the best thing to do is just stay put, because somebody will get injured. Like if you look at the Geordie Murphy situation, he made his move to Ulster before the conclusion of that year's Champions Cup, ends up starting the Champions Cup final. That he couldn't have foreseen what would have happened a couple of weeks later than that. It's almost like a situation now that's a sign for the Leinster players to stay put. You will get your chance eventually, because obviously it's such an abrasive position in the back row.
It is, yeah, and I remember back to my time at Munster. David Wallace was a British and Irish line in 2001, and at the start of the next season in September, he was playing for Gary Owen. It's incredible how it can change very quickly. So I don't know how they're going to facilitate so many of them there, and I'm sure there's more younger players coming through who will fancy their chances, good back rows in Leinster. I don't know what I'd do as a player myself. I think you would certainly try and back yourself to stay and get selected. I think in a sense, you don't get dropped anymore unless it's the big European game, quarter-final, semi-final or final. It's rotation week after week, so it's not back then. Back when I played, you were dropped and it was like devastating, and you weren't selected, and the perception around that. Now, guys, there's so much change. Your reputation is not damaged if you don't play. But ultimately, when Leinster pick a back row for a Heineken Cup semi-final or Heineken Cup final, that's when 3 or 4 got down the pecking order. If you're sitting down there somewhere and you've been training with Ireland, or you've been close to Ireland, or you've been getting man of the match awards during the season,
then you need to think about it.
You know, it's a tough one for players to take, and they have that luxury at the moment.
We're playing England this weekend, obviously. A Triple Crown on the line, a big opportunity for Andy Farrell to achieve something in his first season as head coach. It certainly seems as if we're a differently set up team under Andy Farrell, and it's going to be interesting to see how we set up this week. And it looks like Jerry Thornley says no changes really, apart from Caelan Darcy on the bench. What do you expect from Eddie Jones? A few grenades this week?
I'm not sure. I think he was. He started speaking last week about how he respects Ireland, how good they are and stuff. He hasn't thrown any barbs in yet. He did it for France, talking about the brutality and about the French players wouldn't be able to live with that, and it kind of backfired on him. There was a bit of talk around the Scottish game as well from some of the English players, which was surprising, how they hate us, we hate them, and you know, from some of their inexperienced players that as such. So I used to think when Eddie Jones spoke about Johnny Sexton a number of years ago and his safety and all that stuff, and his parents should be worried, I thought he crossed the line there, and you know, it backfired him then at the World Cup a bit. With Warren Gatland said that you know, sometimes teams play their best performance in a semi-final, and ultimately he was right, and he kind of laughed and sneered at him. I actually, after getting to know him a bit, I think he's definitely a decent fella who just loves stirring the pot a little bit. And when you kind of understand that, you think last year, 12 months ago, John Mitchell was literally told, go out and talk about Ireland, and he spoke about Ireland, they'll bore you to tears, and
then they smashed us.
yeah, they did, and it's those psychological little kind of things. He's trying to put doubt, and he's more or less admitted that, and he was asked after the Scottish game why he does that, and he says he admitted it's to try and create a little bit of uncertainty in the opposition camp. So I don't think it's going to have any effect no matter what he says this week. He'll maybe question Ireland's mentality and that they are brittle after the World Cup, and that, or else he'll tell them they're the best team in the world now and that they're great. And
well, when we won the Grand Slam over there, they had no Tuolangi and no Vunipola days.
Billy Vunipola,
yeah. It's going to be the same situation this weekend.
Yeah, I'm not sure, 100% sure on Tuolangi. I'd be amazed if he plays. You know,
they're a far more beatable team when we play them, when they don't have
well,
those...
if you take you take Billy Vunipola out of the Saracens team or the England team, it's different. He just gives him a real focal point of attack. He every time he carries, it takes a couple of guys to stop him, sucks people in. And Tuolangi, pretty similar in the centre. So they are a different team. They're still a very powerful team. And I think the key this week is for Ireland, I've said it a couple of times, and I suppose I'm over egging the point at times, it's just that intensity that Ireland bring. Doing that game 2 years ago, commentating on it, just the intensity and the pace that Ireland were doing stuff at, it was so hard the way they started the game. England just couldn't get the ball back off them, and they were so efficient in everything they did. So getting up to that level is, I don't think, it's too early to get anywhere carried away, because look, the first two games were games before the tournament started, I thought we'd win. After we beat Scotland, laboured, I was nervous about Wales. So effectively, the real test is Sunday in Twickenham, and it'll be interesting to see if Eddie Jones starts talking about what he says during the week.
Yeah, I expect some of it. Alan, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Right, it is 9:05. We're talking about Manchester City next with Sam Lee of The Athletic. What's going to happen? We'll find out next.